We're lucky to have joining us tonight Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton, a man who fights the bureaucracy endlessly to get Americans transparency from the government. Tom, always great to have you on the show.
Hey, John, good to be with you. Thank you, man.
You've battled these federal agencies. You name an alphabet letter, you've battled it at some point at Judicial Watch. Surprising to you that a standing lawful order from President Trump, was ignored by the FBI and DOJ, and the American public doesn't get these documents?
Oh, absolutely not. The president, this isn't the first time he's ordered the declassification of documents. I recall, I guess back in 2018, a lot of these documents were ordered to be declassified, and they did the runaround to try to protect themselves from being exposed because the documents, to be clear, relate to the improper targeting of Trump and his associates that we know is based on politics and animus as opposed to national security or anything substantive. And in this case, these were documents that were made available pursuant to the president's lawful authority. And in the end, the FBI came up with a lie, which is that the Privacy Act was implicated in the release of these documents by the White House. And that wasn't the case. I mean, I know that directly because we had sued the White House previously over Privacy Act violations. And the circuit court here confirmed that the Privacy Act doesn't apply. Even then, they were ordered to, even if it did apply, as you point out, to release the information, and they still haven't done that. We asked for these documents specifically earlier in the year, and they've ignored our requests. And other documents that have been asked pursuant to a FOIA lawsuit that are covered by this batch, that include would be documents included in this batch, they still haven't released to us. So this is years of litigation, and they're still trying to protect their own in terms of the corruption involving the targeting of Trump.
Amazing.
And Tom, what's astounding about it to me is the brazen audacity and temerity, because in the letter from Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, he preempts their concern about the Privacy Act with respect to the White House. It's incredible, and yet they still use that excuse. But I wanted to ask you about the weaponization of the DOJ. We saw parents labeled as domestic terrorists. We saw the targeting of folks like Jeffrey Clark and John Eastman recently. So many of these issues, the 69-year-old grandmother with cancer who just submitted herself to a 2-month stay in a federal prison in Oakland, California for one misdemeanor. This is something, these are stories that you typically hear of in countries that are not the United States, and it's very concerning. Your thoughts?
Well, but where you compare and contrast it to the treatment, for instance, of the Colbert gang that was in there in violation of the law in the U.S. Capitol that they decided not to prosecute, even though they were arrested because they ignored police orders to leave the building without an escort. You can see that if you're a leftist, you get treated differently than if you're someone who supports Trump by the Justice Department. But to take a step further back, in many ways, this isn't a political decision. This is the Justice Department and the FBI protecting itself from being exposed for being corrupt. And this is the challenge we're facing. The Justice Department is the final arbiter in terms of the legal arguments as to the release of information about Justice Department corruption. And to me, that's where presidents, I'm not naive in that Biden's going to take a step here, but this is what President Trump understood at the end of his administration. He needed to do it directly if the American people were going to know the full truth about the corruption by the Justice Department, the FBI, and the other agencies that supposedly are accountable to the people.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It's the fox watching the hen house, and they just keep the American public from getting the truth. I've been in this town 30 years. I can't think of another group beyond Judicial Watch who has done more to get transparency from agencies that fought to release information. What avenues do we all have? Now we know that there's a standing presidential order from a president who was still in office when he gave the order to release these documents. Could that change the dynamic with the litigation you have or others have in an effort to get these documents out quicker?
Well, potentially. The big problem was, and I think there was a mistake that was made in not just releasing these documents directly out of the White House, is now the Justice Department and the FBI and these other agencies get to relitigate the issue of whether these were properly declassified, And even if they are declassified or there are other reasons to hide them from the American people, that's the challenge. And I mean, we faced that challenge during the Trump administration. So you can bet we're going to face even more of it from the Biden administration.
I wanted to ask you specifically about these documents that they refused to release, because we obviously know that corruption infects every branch of government, every entity, and most people who serve in government. But what specifically do you think, or maybe you know and you can tell us, was in there that they never wanted to receive oxygen?
Well, I think you're going to find that there was no good faith reason to investigate Trump and spy on him. I mean, that's kind of the general outline of everything we've been finding. And to the degree any of that spying was documented, you're going to find that it was just done in a pro forma way. It doesn't deserve to survive any scrutiny, wouldn't have survived any scrutiny by any serious public official or any court. That's what we found in documents to date, and I think that's what they're hiding here. They all knew from the get-go that there was no reason to be spying on an incoming president of the United States or president of the United States. Yet they did it anyway, and that's what they're hiding.
Yeah, a remarkably tragic story when history looks back what really happened here. Tom, I want to turn to some of the other great work Judicial Watch is doing, particularly in the scientific research agencies. HHS is paying $40,000 to study why kids favor whiteness and maleness over other identities. You've been working on ethics issues involving Dr. Fauci, his wife, who's the ethics officer, and of course the inquiry of Wuhan, how the coronavirus may have started in Wuhan. Your take on what we're learning about the NIH, its insulation from scrutiny all these years, what we might really have on our hands?
Well, with respect to the gain of function issue, there needs to be a serious investigation into that scandal. I see evidence of fraud and lies by Fauci and other officials. Indeed, the documents that we just disgorged from the NIH and Fauci's agency after 2 years is that it turns out the FBI was looking into the notorious grant for Wuhan gain of function research in the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China. And the FBI had been looking into that back in April or March of 2020. They've been hiding that detail from us for 2 years. Now, I don't know what the FBI is doing now. My guess is not much. But certainly it would have illuminated the nature of the seriousness of the idea that they were funding gain of function research in China and dissembling about it. And plus, they knew there was a gain of function issue with respect to these grants going back to 2016, the documents show. So they pretended, and Fauci has suggested that they weren't investigating they weren't supporting gain of function research, yet the documents show otherwise. And so when you testify one way and the documents contradict you, according to the rules, you're supposed to be investigated, right?
That's right.
We'll see what happens.
That's really great. Tom, real quickly, how do people follow the good work you do at Judicial Watch?
We're all over the internet. We're on judicialwatch.org and on Twitter, and you can follow me on Twitter at Tom Fitton, and Judicial Watch is on Facebook. Just type in our name, use whatever search engine that won't track you. And you'll find
good advice.
All these documents we're talking about. Your listeners and viewers.
We're going to lose you here, Tom, to a commercial break. But thank you so much, folks. We'll be right back with Mark Meadows right after this.